Labor Talks was John DeRosier, recorded at Chippewa Valley Community Television in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Good day. It is my honor to introduce Colleen Bates, who is not only the Eau Claire County Board Supervisor of District 12, but is also on several committees, including the Administrative Committee, Eau Claire County. She is also the chair of the Human Services Board, and she serves on the Joint Commission on Shared Services Initiatives. She serves on the UW Extension Commission and the West Central Wisconsin Counties Consortium of Commissioners. Colleen, welcome to Labor Talks.
Thank you, John.
I hope I didn't miss anything.
No, I think that's quite enough, thank you.
Okay. Now, perhaps you care to share with us your knowledge of labor history, and from there you can go into how long you've been on the county board and why did you get involved?
Well, I guess if I look at my committees, I certainly found that one thing sort of led to the other. In working in human services as their chair for quite some period of time, you certainly do become aware of individuals in your community that are suffering for the lack of income, the lack of training, and the lack of ability to move upward. That sort of led to a lot of different other things, including my involvement in the Tech College Board and also the Western Wisconsin Counties Consortium Group, which is the oversight group for workforce resource. So I see those things as being very connected. Obviously, I think that when you look at our workforce, there's always been a history of contentiousness between the employee-employer relationships. And you can go way back to when the Industrial Revolution first began. And interestingly enough, women were the ones that really brought the workforce conditions to the forefront in Lowell, Massachusetts, where children were sitting under looms and women were working 14, 15-hour days. And basically the conditions were such that they really and truly had to have a voice. That wasn't done in a way that was simple, nor was it gentle. And often that's the case when it comes to trying to correct issues within the workplace, especially initially. Probably the largest movement as far as workforce was concerned was, since we were an agricultural society, the change from all of the southern part of the United States being slave states to the freedom of the slaves in 1865, and their merging into a very different workforce to be a part of a general society rather than considered to be actually property.
Now, there was a fire in 1911 called the Shirtwaist Triangle Fire.
Yes.
I believe that most of the victims were women.
That's correct. It was in the garment industry. And most of those women were Jewish women. And 147 of them died in the fire. And one would wonder how that could happen. Well, it happened because they locked the door of the factory. And so when the fire began, they couldn't get out. They burned within that facility.
That's true. Now, bringing us, excuse me, bringing us up to the 22nd century, there are those who use wedge issues to divide us. Now, what do you believe are the real issues, and how will they benefit us? That is, the real issues. And when I'm talking about real issues, I'm talking about raising the minimum wage, expanding Medicare. But again, we have those wedge issues that others try to introduce in order to ignore the real issues.
And I think what you're talking about, John, when you say wedge issues, are issues that can create divisiveness between the various elements of the workforce, of the labor force. And so sometimes when you have individuals that are really not making a great deal in their occupations, they have a very different perspective of those that have been secure in their jobs and have had benefits and obviously are in a better place. So that does create a certain sense of contentiousness between those populations. I think that actually comes about because even in organized labor, you're sometimes unable to see a labor force as in a big picture, involving absolutely everyone who's in the workforce. Unions often were created for specific occupational areas. So you had the pipe fitters, and you had the electricians, and many of the others. And really and truly, they became too compartmentalized. And so they didn't think about the guy that was washing dishes at McDonald's. Until we all take a look at what labor does and what the results of their remuneration for their work is, we don't really understand the labor movement.
Yeah, well, some time ago, you had one local or one union opposing another union or local because of conflict, because of they were in different occupations. Now, I've talked with several union people, carpenters, or plumbers and steam fitters, or public employees, and they've learned that it's far better for them to cooperate as opposed to oppose each other and pound the negotiating table. So we have seen some progress in there.
Yep, and I agree with that. I think actually that when that has happened in the past, we've had some really major changes in labor law. Wisconsin was a leader in that effort. Unemployment compensation came out of that kind of collaboration. And certainly if you look at workmen's compensation, you have the same thing. Basically, they also, that was a mass effort. But the success of that was really attributed to the fact that what they were working for impacted every single worker.
This leads me naturally to the next question. And it seems that while many people support raising the minimum wage and expanding Medicaid, voters supported Scott Walker and his allies. Those are the same people who oppose expanding Medicaid and oppose raising the minimum wage. So what happened and why?
I think public education is always a huge issue. And people certainly understood those issues as far as what the minimum wage meant to most individuals that were working. And for some folks, of course, they thought it meant the folks working at McDonald's. They thought that this was a minimum wage effort that only impacted part-time workers, individuals that were in the food industry, and so forth. The fact of the matter is, when they began to understand that people who take care of our most vulnerable citizens, working in our memory care units, working in our assisted living units, also many of them fall into that category. And so I think it was an effort to be able to educate the issue greatly across the state. And obviously on both of those specific areas, they passed, as you know, with a significant percentage. The question then became, it really did not become a real active part of the political campaign. And so they disassociated the issue from the individual that they voted for. It's that 3-minute soundbite thing.
You are hitting the nail right on the head, and I greatly appreciate that.
Thank you.
Now, there are those union members who tend to look down at public employees. They think that what happened to, say, the AFSCME people will not happen to us because we work for private contractors. We are all learning otherwise. That's a fact. Now,
well, the other part of that, John, is public employees really had not the right to collective bargain until 1959. That's in the very recent past.
That's very true.
And so basically, even though unions had that right for a significant number of years, our public employees did not. I think that that is a very short period of time for any labor law to actually endure. that law has now gone away.
As a matter of fact, AFSCME, American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees, got its start right here in Wisconsin.
Correct.
Now, public employees have been pushed aside and pushed down. And I'm just wondering if you have any ideas or suggestions as how we can stop this trend, even reverse it.
I don't know that we can stop it because it is a mindset that people have. But I think if we put it on a personal basis, how many of us remember that teacher that made a huge difference in the way that our life went and redirected us to perhaps even having greater goals for ourselves, where we think we weren't making it and they pushed us to get on with? How many of us remember when we had a car accident or a fire, the individuals who came to help us? I think last winter was certainly an indication of what happens when you have a huge snowfall. And lo and behold, you have to be able to get around. Who are you dependent upon? If you put it at that personal level and not think of it collectively, it's much easier to realize that these people have real jobs, real responsibilities, and many of them are absolutely critical. I think the good news about our Eau Claire County is that really and truly, I think we have a very respectful relationship with the individuals that work for us and with us in the county. If I were to look at the success of our treatment court, which is a national model, that didn't happen by itself. It happened because dedicated people in many sectors of government came together to create a model that basically became a model used anywhere in the country now. I think that kind of collaboration is so essential. And when we look at things that can impact that, we have to realize that if you demoralize the people that are doing these jobs by devaluing them, making them the enemy, then you don't have that kind of collaboration. Imperative. A lot of other areas, as you know, that also show that disappearance of silos and the collaboration not just between government departments, but also segments of government, city, county, private sector. I think a lot of that has really shown in this county that kind of respect, if you will, for every element of what makes us work as a county needs to be there.
You're making my job easy because this leads us again into my next question. And as a non-union person who serves on the Eau Claire County Board, you're very well qualified to evaluate the effectiveness of unions and county employees. So, would you please evaluate their overall job performance? How effective are they in getting our people elected and getting them to listen once elected? That is, once we put somebody in office, we need them to listen to us.
I think, first of all, I think anyone can have access to information that really allows them to see the effectiveness of county government in Eau Claire. We have performance-based budgeting and have had for about 10 years. That means every single department in our budget book lists the programs that they're responsible for. It lists what that program does. It tells who's involved in delivering that program. It tells the cost of that program, and it tells the outcome of that program. And I'll take human services as an example. We have about 80 contracts that are with the nonprofit, private sector. In all of those, there's performance as well that we can look at and say whether or not the expectations are being met. If they're not, we're not going to renew that contract. In county government, for our employees within county government, we hope to be able to attract the best and the brightest. And I think we do in many cases. And obviously, that means that we look for people with innovative ideas, with dedication to job, with outcomes that the public can see by looking at performance-based. So it isn't that necessarily I'm the expert at all. That information is available not only to every county board member at budget time, and also to every citizen that goes online to check it out.
I served with you, and I had the pleasure and the honor, and those aren't just empty words, I had the pleasure and the honor of serving with you on the Human Services Board. And folks, I know for a fact that the Human Services Board, and then the county, but especially the Human Services Board, takes a look at the contracts that are signed. They look seriously at job performance, and they make very certain that not only are the taxpayers getting their money's worth, but also that the contracts are worth signing, and the people who work for human services are doing their job. I've seen this in action.
Thank you, John. I think the other part of it that we need to remember as far as our employees are concerned is that basically, as we, again, this whole issue of making public employees feel somehow less valued. Do you want, when I talked about attracting really good workers, do you want to be the place of choice for those really top candidates to apply? And if you do, then indeed you must respect their work and you must help them to get the skills that they need as their jobs change. Everything changes in every job. And part of what I think the responsibility of any employer is to be sure that they keep their employees to be able to address the needs of that particular time with the technology that's needed to get the job done.
So, what we're saying here, in effect, or at least what I'm saying here, is that if you hold their wages down, if you require them to pay more in premiums for health care, if you require them to pay more for retirement benefits and reduce those benefits, you're going to lose good people, period.
You could. I do think that we have dedicated folks, and even as far as the issue of health care is concerned, when the state mandated that they pay an additional amount in health care, our employees had already agreed to increase the amount that they would be paying. They understood the escalating costs of health care and how it impacted that cost to the county. If you look at the opposite side of that cord, that particular issue, they have no control over that. There isn't anything that has gone up in double digits faster than the cost of health care.
Yep.
They can't buy bread with it. They can't pay their rent with it. They can't take care of their daily needs. And yet it's an escalating cost over which they have no control that somehow they are held responsible for as being part of their benefit package.
We have about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
So, what is your reaction to Act 10? Has it done more harm than good? And did it bring about a more kinder, gentler county government or state government?
I think Act 10 was a political decision that maybe was used to present an agenda to other political ambitions. And did it really help us a great deal? We were already kind of on that road. We've been on a zero-based budget for how long? Better than 10 years. So to think it was a panacea for our problems? No, I don't believe it was. I think there are other factors that come into this, and one of them is that Wisconsin will have a 400,000 person workforce shortage. And we're beginning to see that happen as we speak. So as we look at that and we say if we are to try to think in terms of always oppressing the individuals who we rely on for public works, then basically we may not really attract the best and the brightest. And that's who we want doing our services for us. It was again, for me, a political type move. I think that basically, did it help us? No, not really. It's a very short-term kind of thing.
To your knowledge, did Act 10 help to reduce the state's deficit or reduce county spending at all?
I think really and truly you have to say whose figures do you want to believe? Because there are several different interpretations of what actually that deficit is and when that information is released. I think the more important thing for us is really and truly, how do we develop services that are efficient? How do we do the innovations that are necessary to move our services in a way that it really serves the public? Every person that comes into our courthouse is a consumer, and we're providing services to them. So Act 10, to me, the biggest side effect for that was the devaluing of public employees, and devaluing in a way that isn't necessarily monetarily. It's basically making them feel less proud of those innovations, of the things that they do to make us safer, to meet our needs.
I have to ask this question. I think I know what the answer is, but I have to ask the question anyway. Did Act 10 serve as a tool for local government, and if so, was it a positive tool?
I think it depends on what part you're talking about in local government. If you look at, say, the tech colleges, they looked at it because they have a lot of adjunct staff. They looked for a way to be more flexible with their budgeting. And they looked at the cost factor in healthcare as keeping them from being able to do some of the hires that they wanted to. But then you have to remember, along with that came the issue of not wanting to hire people full-time, because then you had to provide health care coverage and you had to provide retirement benefits. So they backed people up and gave them less hours. That doesn't make a real good condition for a stable workforce either. Did it make us better? I think it divided a lot of folks. I think it made them felt devalued. I'm not sure that it really accomplished much of anything because we're still on a zero-based budget.
Now, finally, is there anything I've forgotten to ask? Is there anything else you'd like to add? We have about 4 minutes left.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm exceedingly proud of the people who work in our governmental entities. And it doesn't make any difference whether we're talking the city of Eau Claire, the county, our educational system, and our shared services committee. We collaborate with all of them. And obviously we work hard to try to be sure that we have actually created an atmosphere of cohesiveness and collaboration rather than an atmosphere of divisiveness. So I would hope that people would, all of us, would take time to look at your public servants and realize what a dedicated group of individuals they are. They're not individuals that often put themselves first. They're the folks that buy crayons for kids when there aren't any in the class. They're the people that often work extra hours in order to be able to get the job done. And they're there when we need them, especially in emergency situations. So I think the whole notion of the contentiousness that can come when you're constantly battling the employer against the employee is not a productive way to be able to think in terms of creating real progress as far as what you want your government to do.
I've talked with union employees, county union employees, and I know for a fact that they're looking for cooperation between the union members, their union representatives, and the county board. Point blank, they are scared. They are really scared of what could happen to them. They could lose their jobs, they could lose their homes, etc. What you just said will help them feel a lot more comfortable, and that means that they'll be more encouraged to do their jobs and do it in their typical high performance style. And I think that's about all we have to say. This concludes today's segment. Colleen, my sincere thanks to you. I mean it.
You're welcome,
really.
John.
You're a treasure.
Thank you.
And my sincere thanks to our audience. After all, if we didn't have you, we wouldn't have this show. So thank you very much.
Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cbctv.org.